No kid's Jewish education should end at 13. Adrabah offers Ontario high school credits infused with Jewish learning online for teens across the province. Ministry approved, intellectually demanding, Jewishly transformative. Adrabah.ca. That's ADRABA.ca. Your teen belongs here.
So apropos of today, though, this is why I'm bringing it up. I just won this in a charity auction. I got an Expos baseball bat signed by Charles Bronfman.
Ooh.
That's kind of cool, no?
That is very cool. Charlie B's John Hancock all over that Expos bat. Nice job, Avi.
What are the next big Jewish ideas? Charles Bronfman thinks he has the answers, and today we discuss them along with how ideas like birthright actually shape Jewish life. All this and more, and of course, textual healing. I'm Avi Finegold, and along with Yedida Eisenstat and Matthew Leibl, we are not in heaven. Let's do a show. Welcome back, everybody. Another episode, Not in Heaven. We're got a lot of great topics coming up today. But first, what have we been up to?
It's been a big, long weekend here. So my boys didn't have school on Friday, and everybody was off yesterday except for me. And my husband left this morning for Nashville for 5 a.m. for a conference on his new co-translation of The Guide for the Perplexed. So it's chaos here as usual, and working hard as much as I can.
I'm in a very, very different schedule. I'm still in like a very quiet place overall. So good luck with the chaos. I'll be there soon. But I want to tell you guys a story from something that happened at my weekly Shabbat dinner with my family. My Baba, 97, Kinahora, as they say, still with us. So now it's a 4-generation dinner hosted by my parents. And as you would expect, there's lots of dynamic conversations. My family is dynamic, to say the least. And they sometimes poke at me and ask me Jewish questions. I'm not from an observant family, an Orthodox family, but steeped in tradition, and they're very literate. My Baba was a Yiddish teacher, so they're steeped in it. So they were asking me, we were talking about kashrut, I think, in relation to my brother-in-law's vegetarianism or something like that. I'm not sure. And they asked me for what's the reason given by God for kashrut. Right. So I this feels like Rabbi 101. And so I default into what a chok is and how there's no explanation given. And then I think that, follow up with an example. So I say, like shatnez. It's just random. Like it's there's no reason given. And the room goes silent. I've said a dirty word by saying shatnez. I just thought this was one that everyone knew. And usually I've got my finger on the pulse of like what people just kind of know. And for people who are listening who don't know what the word shatnez is, maybe Avi, who is our fashion expert, will break it down. But it has to do with not mixing wool and linen, kind of like with your fabrics. And I guess I thought people just knew this as an example, just like a random law in the Torah that like, whoa, what's this all about? So they were floored. They didn't believe me. I had to use AI to prove to them that shatnez was a thing. I was just floored by this, and I figured this is my support group for sharing this story about shatnez.
My first reaction to that was like, wait, was your family deep in the hemp trade and like big linen purveyors?
My dad's business
don't
was
say
in dry
shatnez,
cleaning.
it's a dirty word.
No. But my dad's business was in garments. My dad ran a dry cleaning business. So it's not like clothes are completely, like he's not a dentist or something like that.
So first, I want to separate the difference between no reason given and random. Right. So the fact that there's no reason that is given doesn't mean that necessarily shatnez is random. I, for one, recognize that, this is an opportunity for the law to show that there's a difference between fabrics which are made from animals and fabric which are made from the ground, from the land, from plant-based fibers, and that we don't mix the two, the two types of species, but not species. It's more, we separate the plant world, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom, and we don't put them together, and we don't have that in our clothing as a reminder that the two are separate, and that's fine.
That's our explanation, though, right?
That's my way of thinking about it, but just because there's no reason given doesn't mean it's random.
Right.
I can tell you, as somebody who checks their clothes for shatnez and has a lot of clothes, it's a thing, and you end up thinking about it, and the amount of like suits that I've passed by because it's like, well, it says wool, linen, and silk in it. And that's a big combination for a lot of really high-end fabrics. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not buying that suit. So yeah, shodness is a thing, but I guess people
outside of the Orthodox world, is it?
Everybody has. I guess what you're highlighting, and I think it's important to think about, is the nature of Jewish literacy and what is considered Jewishly literate. When I was teaching, we always had this, like, what are the basics of Jewish knowledge that every Jewish day school kid should walk away from, whether they're in an Orthodox Jewish day school or a regular Jewish, or like a non-Orthodox, a community day school. Is shodness part of that? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, like it's amazing, right? Like even people who don't keep kosher, know of kashrut, know of the concept. They're aware. Like this was just like this. My family legit thought I was playing a prank on them. Thank you. You've helped me process this whole experience. It was really it was a very interesting moment on Friday night dinner. Let me just tell you.
There's your Friday night dinner unpacked. But here's my weird transition for this. Speaking of Jewish literacy. I want to get to, oh yeah, of course. I want to get to this essay, this op-ed that was published this week in JTA, in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, and probably then syndicated to many other sources online. Charles Bronfman, my hometown hero from Montreal, former owner of the Expos, philanthropist par excellence, as we say. Him and his partner, the CEO of his philanthropies, Jeffrey Solomon, or of his investment firm. I'm trying to remember exactly who Jeffrey Solomon is in relation, but they have a close working relationship. So they publish this op-ed and they discuss basically what they think is needed in the current Jewish world, right? So they start by pointing out how they started Birthright 3 decades ago, this project that was guided by this idea, right? The unity of the Jewish people whose soul is in Jerusalem, right? They go on to then list their new agenda for the new age, right? It's centered around creating political networks, minority rights in Israel, and embedding Israeli culture into diaspora Judaism. I guess I want to start by asking, first of all, what is our experience with Birthright? I'll start by saying I went on the first ever Birthright trip in December of 99. I was in Concordia. I was, probably my last year at Concordia. I was in my early 20s. I remember them finding out in September, there's this thing that they're launching called Birthright. I don't think this is ever going to happen again. Who's going to pay for you to go to Israel for 10 days, like randomly? And like just for free, just like go to Israel. I was like, really? There's no strings attached? No strings attached. Go to Israel. If you've never been to Israel, go to Israel. I was like, great, sign me up. And it was sort of a different trip because we, instead of doing 10 days of traveling and tiyulim, we had 3 weeks in a yeshiva in Efrat where we studied Talmud for a good chunk of the day and then went on trips in the afternoon or some full day trips. And we joined up with the larger Birthright contingency for the big launch event.
Had you been to Israel before?
I had not been to Israel before. Going to Israel is expensive and we didn't necessarily have a lot of spare funds for 5 people to go to Israel like that. So that was my experience of going on Birthright. And yeah, it was kind of cool. But it was, a bunch of yeshiva guys. And then there were, definitely modern Orthodox girls that were studying in the women's yeshiva in Efrat at the same time. And we would join up together for some of the trips, thereby fulfilling some of the requirements of the idea of Birthright, which we can get into.
Matthew, what was your experience?
In 2010, December, I went. But earlier that year, at the beginning of the year, I'd gone backpacking for like 3.5 months with who's now my wife, with Heather. And we started in Israel. So, and that was the only 2 times I've been. Same calendar year, and it's been like 15, 16 years. And so I've never been an organized trip kind of enjoyer in general. There were some things about it that were incredible, particularly the community, like meeting other Jews, which we know is ultimately the point, I think. It was mix. It was chetzi, like a mixed experience for me.
I didn't get to go on Birthright because I'd gone on a 4-week-long organized trip in the summer of 1998 with NCSY on their Israel Summer Experience, which I now understand was part of a big philanthropic push, like right before Birthright happened through the 90s, that philanthropists and federations were trying to get young people to go on organized trips to Israel. I didn't know that was like a big thing that was happening, but that's why I couldn't go on Birthright. But Matthew, I want to ask, it sounds like you didn't love organized trips. And I couldn't tell if Birthright is included in not loving organized trips or it was an exception.
No, like there are still things like being in Israel that are incredible, and then Birthright gives you that opportunity. And especially for the fact that, I faked it. Like I was the only one who knew Hebrew, and I found that out quickly, so I didn't let anyone know I knew Hebrew, and that lasted like a day or two because I got so frustrated trying to fake that I didn't know Hebrew. But like for all the people like like most of the people on my trip hadn't gone to Hebrew school, didn't have like strong family connections to it. I could see it being eye-opening for them. Like I saw it being very beneficial for the people I roomed with and the people I talked to. But for me, and having just been there were things that were a little redundant, and the target was unaffiliated Jews from intermarried families. Well, that's not my family, so I guess that makes me not in their target demo. But the people who were in the target demo seemed to respond to it, so I got to give them a thumbs up on that.
Okay, so that leads me to like, the first real big question of this discussion, if I want to think about this, is like the classic understanding of birthright and what birthright was there for was to make Jewish babies, right? Was a response to the statistic in the 90s, was the statistic in the 90s that 50% of Jews were intermarrying.
More than 50.
More than 50. I was trying to just round, but anyways. And therefore, we needed to make more Jewish babies. We needed to increase the natalism of the Jewish people. And this would be a way to like get Jews to like hang out with other Jews and make Jewish babies, whether on the trip or off the trip. Yedida, what do you make of what birthright got right and what birthright got wrong, so that we can like move into the, looking at where we're at today?
So I think the data is really interesting, and I'm glad that there's like this investment in metrics and tracking. I had, past tense, always thought that birthright was about cultivating the diaspora Jewish community's relationship with Israel, and that's definitely a piece of it. But it sounds to me, and like having, read more and thought more about birthright, which I haven't really done because I'm not a modern Jewish sociologist.
You're sociologist adjacent.
Moonlights.
Sure. That it really was designed and is designed to strengthen the unity of the diaspora Jewish community. And the brilliance of it is, we now understand more deeply the experience, right? Like kids that go to camp together have always had that experience, right? Like 10 days on a super immersive, very intense Jewish experience with other emerging adults. Like there's nothing like that for, having a experience in your life that like changes its course. And to some extent, the data bears that out, right? The data bears out that the people who go on birthright are much more likely to marry somebody else who's had a similar experience, right? So another Jew who is prioritizing Jewish things in their life and having a Jewish family and giving to Jewish charitable causes and being in some kind of organized Jewish leadership and like belonging to community. So all of that seems to have borne out as true, and I think a reasonably good investment. Avi, did I answer your question?
Yeah, it's getting there, meaning that there's definitely good stuff that Birthright has done. The question, I guess, that I can ask is the relationship between correlation or causation. Did Birthright do that, or did the people who went on Birthright are the types of people who may have otherwise done this?
No, Birthright did that.
Okay. So,
and I can tell you, like, I've been doing weddings for over a decade, and I've had enough Jewish weddings where the couple
that they met on
Birthright that it's a thing. It's enough of a thing anecdotally in my life that I believe it to be rep of the population.
I want to ask Matthew, though, do you think that your experience on Birthright was one of those formative experiences that like helped you realize that you belong in Jewish leadership? No. Okay.
Not for me. No, because again, I already had it. I even had it earlier in that year on my own. Like the first time I came around the corner in the old city and saw the Kotel, that experience was amazing. If it had happened on Birthright, Birthright would get credit for it. But it happened to me 9 months before I went on Birthright. So Israel, yes. Being there, check. Jerusalem, check. But not on Birthright. But had it been my first trip, I think I would have to give it more credit because it would have been the thing that got me there. I do lots of funerals for people who, steeped in Jewish identity, never made it to Israel. So the getting you to Israel, the overcoming barrier, like Avi, like you said in your opening, like how long are they going to send us to Israel for free, right? Like, and the getting them there, as much as the making Jewish babies, I think that it's a little cynical, it a little undersells the like getting them to Israel. Like you said, Av, Israel's far. You grew up in Winnipeg, like, your family might be more inclined to go to Palm Springs than to Israel.
Totally.
Like, it's just kind of the reality.
I guess I'm asking myself, like, if we believe part of it was the making Jewish babies or the reduce the rate of intermarriage, one might say it failed miserably because the intermarriage rate has gone up. Maybe we can say that if not for birthright, then the intermarriage rate might have gone up even more and that this slowed it down.
Maybe.
I think that wasn't just about making Jewish babies and the intermarriage rate. It was also about keeping the next generation of Jews connected to the Jewish community, even though, in the 90s, Jews had already overcome a lot of what had been keeping them together. So freeing Soviet Jewry and Holocaust memory and all of those like major Jewish organizational goals had been achieved. And it was sort of like, okay, what's the next frontier? How can we positively dedicate our energies to something that will sustain our community as people were increasingly disaffiliating, the marker of which isn't only marrying somebody who isn't Jewish.
So let's move on to the ideas that they bring up as what they think is the prescription for the future, right? So they talk about creating more political networks in and outside of Israel. They talk about minority rights in Israel, meaning supporting Druze, supporting Bedouins, supporting Palestinians. That's their order that they put it in, not necessarily my order that I would put it in. And then they have a whole piece about embedding Israeli culture into diaspora Judaism. What do we make of these ideas to begin with? Do we think that these are important ideas?
Back up for a second, Avi. Like, what is I'm not positive I'm completely clear on what the problem is before the solutions.
If you look at the article, they say that the unity that they think was there for a while feels more fragile than ever. In this post-October 7th world, we believe it is urgent to take action to sustain Jewish peoplehood so that it can withstand rising anti-Semitism, political polarization, and threats to democracy both in Israel and across the diaspora.
So just quickly around the table, the three of us, solving the world's problems and everything, like, do we agree? Like, is Jewish unity fractured? I don't know that I agree with that. Like, I read it and I totally agree.
I think Judaism is fractured, but not across the lines that they are listing. I think that it's fractured on very, very different lines.
I think there are lots of fault lines.
Yeah.
But aren't we always like that, though? Like, aren't we a people who are like always arguing and unified in our arguing, though? Like, let's not think for a second that we've all ever had a history where we agreed with each other, and yet we've always been unified, right? So just because we're disagreeing about Israel.
I remember growing up, the image that everybody used to say about Israel is that everybody vehemently disagreed with each other, but they'd be sitting at a coffee shop arguing with each other for hours about what should be going on in Israel. And that was the standard model of thinking about the Jewish approach. They have very big disagreements and very different opinions politically, but they're at least arguing with each other. And now people are not even, they're retreated to their own corners and just doing their own thing, as we've talked about many times on the show.
For sure we have. Not just Jews, but everybody. But yes.
And there's also this, big question about whether or not Israel should remain at the center of everybody's Jewish priorities. The new proposals of what to do going forward, the Office for, Diaspora, Israel, Political
It's like instead
Action,
of APAC, it's DIPAC.
DIPAC, which I think actually is smart, but also obviously very fraught for a million different reasons. Israel's allowed to do what Israel's going to do, just like America's going to do what America's going to do. What's it going to do for the Jews in the rest of the world if Israel does X? Like, should Israel have that consideration? And it gets into this like murky place of what is the relationship between diaspora Jewry and Israeli Jewry. And I think that that's one of the major fault lines.
My sense is that none of these ideas that they're bringing up are really anything new or anything that bold. They're just trying to take things that might make a lot of sense and just say, hey, we have to invest heavily into this.
Like, step it up, right? I like this idea of getting Israel to us in North America. I like the bringing Israel here. And they always have it, right? Like you said, like there's Israelis who come for visits and they go to the school for a period of time, but it feels like, I always joke, like I remember one time someone told me that it's so funny that at Hebrew schools in North America, they sing Yom Huledet Sameach with like Happy Birthday as a tune, because it's not what they sing in Israel. And I was like, well, what do they sing in Israel?
I assume it's like Hayom Yom Huledet, Hayom Yom Huledet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
So like, but those sorts of things, like it's so like the Americanization of Israeli culture needs to be reversed by having actual Israeli culture brought here so that we can experience the things, so that there isn't this disconnect between, because like Jews in Israel, like a kid comes to my son's class, moves from Israel. The culture shock is intense, even though they're in a Jewish environment. So I like the idea that is a problem that can be smoothed out. Right? Like I perceive that to be the biggest threat. I don't perceive it from older generations. I perceive it in younger generations.
You're saying the disconnect you think is the biggest problem, the cultural divide between diaspora Jewry and Israeli Jewry.
Yeah, like in the air in North America, Israel is like this, has this terrible connotation. Or for young people who are hearing this rhetoric, you know, as their thoughts are being shaped, they're getting really blasted with a lot of anti-Israel thought that I never heard growing up, right? Like it was not like that.
And you think the solution
and there
to
was
that
no internet.
Is more Israeli culture in America rather than like Jewish education, Jewish experiences, Jewish pride?
I liked the going there too, but if they were looking to reshape it, if they're looking for another thing, I don't know. It just intrigued me. It caught me as being interested because I do think that they are on the other sides of the world. And I remember when Israeli students would visit us, like they go to the army, we don't. Like there are huge differences between their growing up and what they see in our growing up and what we see in their growing up. You know, you go to Israel and you see all these, I remember I just see like women who looked like models when I was 20 or in my early 20s, and they all have guns and they're all in army dress and they're all just riding the train. Like it's a world different, and yet we're all Jews.
There's much less of that now. There's not as many
I'm going back to 2010.
Yeah.
I'm going back to 2010. Like people know the time, right? Like people know the time.
Yeah. I can't figure out what we are theoretically designing for, right? Like if on the one hand, there's something romantic, and it was pretty successful to like throw millions and millions, billions, I'm sure, of dollars at Birthright and helping young Jews have this experience that they otherwise wouldn't have had. I want to see an articulation beyond Jewish unity. And we talked about this a few weeks ago on One Table, right? Like we're giving the next generation these experiences without any expectations or strings, which make people run away. But what's the goal here? Is marrying another Jew and living a Jewish life a small ask or an enormous ask? And, you know, what do we need and what support are we offering after this experience? Like, are there nudges towards deepening your understanding of Jewish history, culture, education, practice, like choose your own Jewish adventure? Like, I want to understand like what happens afterwards, because it can't just be the one-off. And I want to hear an articulation of what's the value here. Like, what is it? Just continuity? Like, what does that mean? You know,
what strikes me about these ideas that they're putting forward is that they're not necessarily very average Jew oriented. I don't know how to put that a little bit better. There's probably a technical meaning in the sense that like they want to create political influence, right? They want to have more political groups, but that's not about most people getting involved in politics. It's creating alliances that are more political. They want to have more rapprochement with minority communities in Israel, but that's not the average Jew. That's not the equivalent of Birthright, where we want to get as many Jews to have an experience of some kind as possible. And the third one is sort of like that. It's like, let's find ways that we can get more Israeli culture and ideas back into the diaspora, or vice versa. So that was the first insight that I found about this. I already said that I think that none of these are really huge, like new ideas, but I'm also struck by the fact that these are people with a really big checkbook that get to say to themselves like, hey, I have this idea, I get to do this. And that's very typical of what happens with big ideas in the Jewish community, right? PJ Library is being funded by Harold Grinspoon, who had this idea that Jewish kids should have books, right? Moishe House was funded by one person, right, who was influenced by somebody else who said, this is a big Jewish idea that we should have this programming for people in their 20s after college before being involved in the established Jewish community. Great. So like two things I think are wrong with that is one is you're not really looking at what other ideas are out there that are totally off your radar that you might be passing by and say, oh, this is important.
So are you suggesting that we should have like a Jewish Shark Tank, like a convention where the people with great Jewish ideas come and pitch to mega donors who can just fund them?
So that has happened, right?
Okay.
You know, the point of Upstart, in theory, is for that to happen, is to highlight and give tools to the next Jewish idea to like rise to the surface. I have other critiques about those things in that they don't usually fund them well enough, and they give them tools, but they don't necessarily, and resources, but sometimes you just need real money to be able to get a big idea off the ground, and that's an issue. But there have been attempts at that, and I think that those things are very important to get ideas percolating and to be moving forward. But that actually leads me to my next point, which is I think it's hard to really get big ideas out there and to say, this is my big Jewish idea or my big idea, period, and I'm going to push it forward and make it happen, right? Big ideas just often have a life of their own and they emerge, right? You don't get like... There are so many examples of rich people trying to get their big idea out there, and it doesn't work, right? Mark Zuckerberg tried to get Meta to happen, right? He thought the metaverse was going to be the next big thing, and it wasn't. It just sort of has died. And just because he threw hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that the metaverse was going to be the next big thing, didn't actually make it happen.
I think that this new venture that Charles Bronfman is suggesting, and the political, the Diaspora Israel Political Action Committee and Preservation of Democracy, and like Israel sort of remembering that being good to its minorities is actually like an imperative. Like, I think that there's a lot of good in there. It feels to me a little reactive, right? Like all of a sudden we're in this moment where the whole world, there's like a lot of Israel and Zionist
100%,
and
100%.
So we're going to fix that by, throwing money at the problem. Sorry, everybody. And trying to bring Israel back to, the values that we as diaspora Jews think it should have. I would love for those things to happen. And I'm glad that it looks like there will be, a well-funded push in that direction, because I think that both of those things are important. But like Avi pointed out, I don't think it addresses the question of like, where is the American Jewish community right now? And how can it be better by whatever metric that is, with respect to Jewish unity, Jewish practice, Jewish community, right? Like it is my understanding that over the last few years, we talked about this, and we saw it with One Table, that like in the wake of October 7th, Jews were seeking Jewish community, and some organizations were better able to meet that moment. I don't know that we're continuing in that moment. I just know that like, I'm sure there are a lot of really good ideas that could use a lot of funding. I want to confess that like the thing I'm always guilty of is designing for the thing that, right, like projecting what I love about Judaism onto everybody else. And I would imagine that like a lot of the people with these great ideas also are like, well, what do I want? What do I need? And I'm sure that, if we had 10 or 12 of those really, strong and up and running different models of how to help young Jewish people find their way into a meaningful way of being Jewish, that would be great. But I think that like we're all over the place.
I 100% agree with what you're saying, Yedida. I had a big Jewish idea for years. I've always thought that like adult learning, Jewish learning, deep Jewish learning is the thing that everybody needs, because you need that strong Jewish identity, but you need text and you need classic ideas, you need words in front of you and people discussing them and fighting them out and all of that. But I've learned over time that nobody wants to fund this, and that even when I would get funds to do something like this, people wouldn't show up. And I realized, oh, my idea is actually a crappy idea. And I've learned that. And like, I'm okay with that. Like, I got to figure out a different way for my idea to like work better. But I'm okay with the idea of failure. And I think that we should be like welcoming the ideas of failure. I think that when we fund a lot of these Jewish organizations, we should be okay with the fact that a lot of them might fail. And a lot of them are going to fail, and that's okay. It's not a waste of $50,000, right, times 3 over 3 years for a grant to say we've wasted $150,000 on this idea because it died after 3 years. That's fine, because it'll teach us that that is not something, and we're able to pivot to the ones that actually have succeeded. And that's part of the venture capital model, is that you fund a bunch of stuff, and then you find the things that succeed because of that. And we don't do that because as a community, we are often very risk averse with these dollars.
Interesting.
I also don't think it has to be one thing, right? Like, and I think
again, that's the point of the venture capital model, is you fund 20 things, and if 75% of them fail, you still have 5 great ideas that now have emerged.
I also don't think that adult Jewish learning is a bad idea. I just think that it's like competing for everybody's priorities, right? Like, people are professionals and raising families and sandwich generation, and it's just hard, and Zoom is not the way. So it's like, it's really hard out there to compete for people's time.
Okay, let's move on to textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
All right, for textual healing this week, Parshat Truma. Who wants to get us started? Yedida?
Parsha Truma. So this week's Parsha is all about God's instructions for building the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. God tells the children of Israel, make me a sanctuary and I will dwell in your midst. It's a beautiful idea. So lots of detailed instructions, and some people, maybe architects and design people, could be really interested in this. Other people are potentially less interested in all of the details. I just want to point out one thing that can give a framework for the reading, which is that the sanctuary sort of was in 3 parts, and only certain people determined by their levels of sanctity, if they were sort of general Israelites or Levim or priests, could enter different parts of this space. And this is true later in the temple also. And the stuff of the temple, the implements, the tables, the altar, etc., in the places where sort of everybody was allowed, were made of sort of more common materials. And as you moved closer to the sanctum, right, the holiest place where God's presence would reside, the materials became more and more valuable. So you move from stone and copper and bronze into gold. So in the innermost parts of the temple, the altar and the table and incense stuff that sort of sits in front of God was made of gold. And so, that's one thing to keep track of while you're, listening to the Torah reading this Shabbos.
Speaking of gold, I got one that kind of builds on that. Good one, Yedida. Not my favorite parsha as a literary student of the Torah or as a Torah reader. Very repetitive, tough, no flow, always very tough. Didn't look forward to Truma. But there's a teaching I love, because one of the IKEA instructions in the Parsha is for the ark, how to build the ark. And there's a line that they're talking about after they build the ark, to overlay it with gold, right? Mi bait umichutz titzapenu. So they have to overlay it with gold inside and outside. This is a good one, right? This is a good one for Truma. So I like this one because the whole idea is that no one was ever going to see the inside of the ark after they built it ever again. So what's the point? Why bother having it gold on the inside? And they actually talk about it in the Talmud, and I think that one of the rabbis says something, a person's inside, their conviction their sincerity has to match the outward expression of it. Or another way, like, so if you don't believe in it, but you're faking it through life, you're not a Torah scholar. They specifically say you're not a Torah scholar. Or I think another way that I saw it framed was if you act one way in public, but you act a different way in private. I love it. It's a great teaching. It's great textual wisdom why it's gold on the inside of the ark. So
That's great. Thank you, Matthew.
There you go, Truma.
Matthew, have you ever been called a Klei Kodesh, a Kli Kodesh? Have you ever heard this term?
Because of like Torah reading mishaps and like little vowel?
No, because you're one of the leaders of the community. You're one of the sacred people.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. I've heard rabbis like in our rabbi chat refer to us as that
Klei
group,
Kodesh.
and I felt like it was kind of like self-serving. But yeah.
So it's an interesting term because it's like you're the sacred vessels of the community. You're the ones that are like doing this. But as rabbis, I always find that like there's a bit of a flip side to that in that you're being like an object for other people's spirituality, right? You're a vessel, you're a container to hold other people's spirituality. And people don't often realize that there's a negative connotation to that you're sort of like being used in this way. And I always think about it whenever I hear of a colleague of mine and they have their installation ceremony. And every time I hear that, I always think about like, great, everybody please bring a drill and a screwdriver because we are installing this rabbi into the sanctuary. They're not going to leave. They're going to be bolted in and they are part of the community, right? So a Kli Kodesh is this term that we use for the leaders of the community, the spiritual leaders of the community, but it's not always great. But as you point out, Matthew, there can be a different flip side about it. And this is actually what I wanted to talk about, actually using one of the songs from Ishai Ribo, who actually has this song called Mi Bayit U'Michutz, the inside and the outside. And he assumes that it's about gold and like the idea that like your goodness might be good on the outside, good on the inside. Nobody should talk about you. And the only person or the only thing that can judge or should be able to or should know this is God. God is the only one who knows the Toho Kabaro, the inside as much as well as the outside. And he basically reminds everybody that everybody is a Kli Kodesh. Everybody's a sacred vessel that is beautiful on the inside with gold, and nobody should judge that and nobody should say anything. And so I highly recommend that you go listen to the lyrics to this song and find the translation, or just go on Google Translate and translate it. But it's filled with a lot of little references to it. But I just love that he takes the ark, right, that is covered on the inside and the outside with gold as you talk about it, and flips the script basically and says everybody is a sacred vessel. God wants all of this, and the world was created for all of us. And before we go, I do want to welcome new listeners who I know are listening to the show, but most particularly I would like to welcome the newest listener of Not in Heaven, and that's Abner Lyle Fraiman, who now has an episode in his life that he should be able to listen to and wish Mazel Tov to, the Fraiman family, the director of the CJN Podcast Network in general. Mazel Tov, and hope he's everything you hope him to be and more. And that's it.
Mazel, yeah.
Have a great week, everybody.
Mazel Tov. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kauffman. Michael Fraiman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.